The good book says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. This little but yet very potent pink member that tends to get some of us in trouble has the capacity to speak life and death, to plant a seed that nurtures or destroys. What kinds of seeds have you planted this week, this month, this year, today, with this powerful member that can be a beast to some and a blessing to others? And to whom did you plant them? As you know, the tongue isn't the only source of planting. From the words we speak, the behaviors we demonstrate, and through our overall actions, and sometimes in our failure to act, and in our relationships, we are constantly planting seeds. And not only are we seed planters, the giver of seeds, we are also benefactors, as others plant seeds within us. What are you the benefactor of as a result of what others have planted in you? How has it impacted your life? One day, while sitting down assessing my life, feeling alone, feeling like no one showed up for me as a teen and as a young adult, it came to me that in my loneliness, I was never truly alone. That I had seed planters along the way that helped me on this journey. Yes, I did all the hard work, but I didn't do this alone. Although I had no stable home or guardians, from 13 on, I had seed planters. For the people like the Hammonds family that showed up for me as a teen, or some of my family members, whether you gave me a bed or a couch to sleep on, and whether it was for a few days, a week, or a few months, I remember. For my 6th grade teachers at Schofield Middle School in Aiken, South Carolina, Miss Trina Paget, who gave me my first hug when she found me crying after being bullied by the other kids in the hall. Miss Bridget Peoples, who bought me a pair of shoes because the ones I wore to school had holes in them. And Miss Doretha Brown, who paid me every other Saturday to clean up her house that wasn't really dirty, and who would feed me and treat me like family. And she always gave good compliments. For my acting teacher in college who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for allowing me to borrow your faith in me until I was strong enough to build faith of my own. For the number of professors who allowed my daughter to sit in on my classes because I didn't have a babysitter or any means to pay for one. For my daughter who behaved every single time because she knew I'd kill her. And for Jack Ferber, who gave me my first car, so I would no longer have to travel late at night to and from school on buses, and for giving me my first apartment, even though I didn't have the means to pay my rent, and then for hiring me part-time only to refuse rent from the check they gave me, telling me to take care of myself and my daughter until I was able to stand on my feet. For God, who taught me through his word that he would supply my needs, which is the faith I stood on when I was crazy enough to walk into that housing office without a job or a dime and apply for a 2-bedroom apartment, knowing that I was unqualified. And to approach Jack Ferber on that warm, sunny day outside on the steps and boldly ask the question, "Can I have your car?" Both of which I was granted, and I didn't have to compromise myself to get either. For Bishop T.D. Jakes, who taught me from afar to try God by asking God for something that's beyond my reach and watch him perform miracles. For the great motivator, Les Brown, who also taught me from afar to be relentless, to use every no as practice and not as a reason to give up. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, your seed planters are from afar, but they are seed planters nevertheless. For the Northwest Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network, who gave me and my daughter shelter, food and services when we were homeless, and then for years later, giving me a job where I was later promoted to become the program's director. And for the number of others, such as neighbors, friends, co-workers, and even strangers, both near and far, who planted a seed in my life with either a pat on the back, constructive criticism, or with words of encouragement. They may not have realized it, but each of them in their own way played a part in my overcoming and in my development. And dare I say, even for those who misused me and meant me no good, they too planted a seed. Oh yeah, though rotten to its core. But it only deepened my gratitude for the good seed planted. It taught me wisdom and forgiveness and revealed my immeasurable strength and God's infinite grace. And for my grandmother, the late Minnie Ree Hollingsworth, who outside of God individually planted the most seeds of them all. Yes, we were the epitome of dysfunction and the perfect picture of poverty. We were P-O. We never could afford to advance to that next level of poverty and just be ordinarily poor. Honey, poor would have been a luxury in comparison to being poor. Check out my poem, I Remember. And there you will get a real glimpse into my poor life. At times, we ate off of brown Piggly Wiggly paper bags. And yes, I said Piggly Wiggly paper bags. Because all of the plates in the house were broken. Lights, water, and heat being turned off was the norm. Food was a scarcity, but chaos reigned supreme. But then, for a time, so did the laughter. We laughed a lot at ourselves and at each other, in spite of the constant state of struggle and pain. You know, my grandmother, she ruled the house. She ruled the house with an iron fist. During a time when children were seen and not heard, she whipped butts first and asked questions never, because your answer truly didn't matter. Life was no picnic. Nevertheless, after birthing 15 children of her own, she took me on from birth and called me daughter. She did the best she knew how to do with what she had. So I thank her for loving me until her last breath and for planting those foundational seeds in me, such as how to make a way out of no way, how to survive, respecting my elders, standing up and fighting for myself, feeding the hungry even in the face of my own adversity and lack, and showing up to help someone else in need because I give a damn about someone other than myself, and doing so without expectation. There were times in our household where she took on nieces, nephews, a brother, her mother, her grown children and daughter-in-law, and other grandchildren. We slept 6 to a bed, and oftentimes she made pallets on the floor, living in a shack with nothing but each other. Nothing but each other. You know, one of my fondest memories was when my great-grandmother, grandmother, a host of cousins and uncles and aunts slept on mattresses and pallets that were laid out all over the floor. We had a lot of fun down there, the young and the old, several generations all clustered together, talking and laughing and just being silly. There I found myself ear hustling. I remember my great-grandmother and grandmother laying down there talking about their good old days. It was nice to hear those stories. Another memory I have is when I was 12 years old, and it was just my grandmother and I home alone. I watched my grandmother answer a knock at the front door, and on the other side of the door stood this white man. Now, you've got to understand that no white people lived in our community at the time, so this was unusual for us to see. And my grandmother wasn't too trusting of white people because of our sordid history in this country, and particularly in the South, between blacks and whites, and perhaps because of our own negative personal experiences with some. But she did not allow those feelings to prevent her from doing a greater good. This man was dirty from head to toe, unshaven and unkempt, and it was very, very hot outside. He asked my grandmother, "Can I please have a drink of water? I've been walking all day and I'm thirsty." She went back into the kitchen and filled a large mayonnaise jar, cause these were the glasses that we often drank from because we were too poor to afford to buy glasses. She filled the glass up with ice water. She returned later to the front door, and there I stood behind her from across the room in the doorway, looking on with curiosity. The man thanked her, and she replied, "You're welcome." And then she abruptly asked, "Would you like some supper too?" The man anxiously shook his head in reply and said, "Yes, yes, thank you, ma'am, thank you, ma'am." It was obvious to her that he wasn't just a thirsty man, but he was also a hungry man. And she returned with a large plate of pork and beans over rice and a couple of pieces of fried chicken. And she wrapped it up in aluminum foil. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking to my young and ignorant self, she is giving that old dirty white man our food when we barely have enough to eat for ourselves. Now what we gonna eat? I said I was young and ignorant. The man graciously took it, and he repeatedly bowed his head and said, "Thank you, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, God bless you, thank you." And then he left. We had nothing, but would you like some supper too? Deep-rooted in our own poverty, had known many hungry days, but would you like some supper too? She extended herself to yet someone else in need, and did so without hesitation, a seed planter. So there I was, years later, in my early 20s, a single parent on welfare, renting a room and receiving food stamps, going to school and struggling to get through to one day to the next, when I came across a homeless man sleeping under the 69th Street Bridge in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. For many months, I would buy him coffee and sandwiches once I would cross over on the other side of that bridge, and I would give it to him. I never knew what to say to him, but through my actions, I wanted him to know that I saw him and that I saw his pain. And that's when I reflected back on my grandmother, realizing that she too did not see the color of that man's skin that knocked on our door back in 1984 on Sumter Street in Aiken, South Carolina. Nor did she consider her own poverty, but she saw his humanity instead. She planted this seed in me. Many, many months later, I stopped seeing this man sleeping under the 69th Street Bridge, and I didn't know what had happened to him. But one day I was walking across that same bridge when this perfectly shaven, clean-cut stranger approached me with excitement. "I got a job, and I'm renting a room. I got a job." I didn't know who he was at first, but then I realized that it was the man who slept under the bridge, that I had fed and given coffee to on many occasions, bought with welfare dollars, with food stamps. What was once on top of him, the bridge that he slept under in a cardboard box, he now stood upon, walking and standing proudly with his dignity and confidence restored, and with hope and gratitude in his heart, a benefactor of my grandmother's seed. I became a giver of seed, a seed planter. Even when I didn't think I had nothing to give. You too are seed planters, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of your current station in life. What have you been planting? Your blessings are in the soil. What have you been planting? And if you think you're not blessed enough to be a blessing to someone else because you have no shoes, then maybe you need to consider the ones who have no feet. And if you have no feet, consider the ones who have no arms. And if you have no arms, consider the ones who are not in their right minds. And if you are broken because you've been abused, consider the ones who died in their trauma, who will never witness another moonlit sky, feel the warmth of the sun on their faces, or dance to their favorite tune. My point is, in you, you have something. Even in your feelings of lack, feelings of nothingness, in you, there's a seed in you. Yes, we were a chaotic and dysfunctional group of people. And at times, my grandmother was hard. But she used to say, take the meat, child, and throw away the bone. So that's what I did here. I eventually took what was good in her teachings, and it became my nourishment, the good seed. And I threw away the bone because it became my stumbling block. Some of you may be carrying around bags of bones right now that you need to get rid of. I took life with her for granted until I was left to stand on my own as a teenager, 13 years old, to a world and to circumstances that did not see me as one of their own as my grandmother saw me. No, Minnie Ree Hollingsworth saw me. And for a time, I resented my family for that, because I didn't feel that they really showed up for me as a kid and didn't have a vested interest in my life and well-being. When they thought I was asleep in their homes, for example, they'd talk amongst themselves, and they wouldn't whisper, they would talk about how I was not their responsibility and that they had other mouths to feed, which was true. They said that I was my mother's responsibility now and that she needed to step in and step up and be the mother she never was. And for the longest time, I was privately resentful because these seeds left me feeling unloved and unwanted. I was a child of inconvenience, and I became emotionally stuck. I had moved 14 times from age 13 to 17, and I belonged to no one. I was suddenly no one's child, no one's responsibility, and it hurt, and I couldn't grow. So I became stuck in my emotional turmoil. Also, when my grandmother was ill prior to her death, another memory I have is when I stood in the doorway of our home watching in fear as she would vomit into a bucket as my great-grandmother, her mother, held her head and cleaned her up. I remember wanting so badly to run over and hug her and to tell her that I love her and to say thank you for raising me, but my legs would not move. I was stuck. We never uttered the words, I love you, in my family, nor did we give hugs. And those were the two things I wanted to give her most in this world. But no words could escape this paralyzed tongue of mine, and nothing could move my feet. I was stuck. And for 17 years, I agonized over those moments, over the things I wanted to say but couldn't, and over the things I wanted to do but didn't. Seeds of insecurity, fear, and regret grew up inside of me and began to take on a life of their own. I couldn't speak those words. I couldn't give that hug. And it haunted me for a long time. What seeds haunt you? Those you've sown, or those that were sown into you? Benny King, version of the song Stand By Me, was one of my favorite songs before the passing of my grandmother, and it still is. I'd listen to it all the time as a child, but it was ironic that it was playing on the radio on a station called Foxy 103 when I learned of her passing. Part of the lyrics says, "If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, and the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry. No, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me." And there I was, suddenly, at 13 years old, knocked down with a painful realization that I had no one standing by me. And I desperately needed to have someone there, as all children do. So for a long time, I cried. I cried and I shed many tears. And for years, even as a grown woman, I was still in many ways that 13-year-old girl standing in that doorway, powerlessly watching my grandmother unable to lift up her own head as she choked on her vomit at 56 years old. I was stuck. I was still that young girl listening to Stand By Me when I got that horrific news. Because for 17 years, I cried whenever I heard that song. Because I was stuck. One day I was standing in the supermarket when that song came on, and I cried in the bakery aisle, wiping tears and quickly trying to regain my composure because I didn't want the other customers on the aisle to think I was losing my mind. I was stuck, ladies and gentlemen. I was stuck. I was still that teenager who pretended to be asleep in various family members' houses, secretly shedding tears when hearing my family say that they didn't want me living with them, that I was a burden, and that I was not their responsibility. I was stuck. And I had to figure out a way to reach back in time and take my 13-year-old self out of that doorway. And I had to forgive myself for not speaking those words, "I love you," to my dying grandmother, and for not giving that hug. And I had to forgive my family, including my mother and my father, whoever he is, for not showing up for me as a kid the way I needed them to. I had to realize that we were all broken and that the past was now but a memory. I permitted the seeds of forgiveness to prevail because the past is over. It's over. So I selected to no longer be stiff, stuck, stagnated, and deprived, living in the thresholds of history. And I chose to remember the seed planters and to take the meat and to throw away the bone. So when you think you're alone in the world like I did, or that you did it completely by yourself, remember the seed planters that has or who will come into your life for a time, who will bless you for a season. Don't resent them because the blessing wasn't wrapped up in pretty, or because the blessing was only for a season. Be grateful that someone showed up and gave you grace for a season. For it is sometimes in that one season you build enough endurance to keep you going. that will empower you to get to and through your next season. At age 17, I hopped on a Greyhound bus alone and unknowingly pregnant, with only $5 in my pocket and a one-way Greyhound bus ticket, because I was in search of more. It was that dream that ignited a small spark of hope and that planted a seed that more was possible, even for me. Even for me. It was that mustard seed faith that carried me through the hardest of times, that gave me courage to get on that bus when others around me said, "That child don't know what she's doing. I'll give her 2 weeks and she'll be back here in Aiken with us." Well, I've been gone now for 25 years. There's a saying that God takes care of fools and babies. Well, child, I was both. And the insecure and the fractured teenager who got on that bus back in 1989 doesn't exist anymore. She's gone. No one knew. Not even myself, not even me, that along the way, throughout my life and from various sources, seeds had been planted. Seeds that were designed to set me on my purpose. At age 25, I wrote what some might say is my deliverance poem, I Cry No More. And you can find it on my debut CD, by the way, Not Another Tear, Moving from Pain to Purpose, which you can purchase on my website at Hollingsworth.com. As I was saying, I Cry No More is reflective of my deliverance from a past that left me shattered. But today I stand before you, looking in front of me and not behind. The wounded version of me was healed, delivered, and set free. You too, ladies and gentlemen, can be set free. Yes, struggle was a friend of mine because I knew it very well. It forced me to build muscles in times of adversity. But it was also my adversary that at times brought me to my knees. But I declared that I'd rather struggle my way out of my wilderness to get to my place of destiny than to succumb to the agony of the past. Whether friend or foe, I had to look at my struggles from the inside out and sift through the rubbish in order to identify my seed planters whom I had forgotten in all of the chaos. But today I remember. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have scars from the seeds that were planted in your life by someone else or even by you. But don't let them serve as means to stop you. You see, some of us look at our scars and we pick at them and we remember our pain. But let me challenge you to look at your scars and remember your bravery instead. Remember your triumph. Remember your strength and say to yourself, I may be scarred, but I am not destroyed. I am not what I've been through. I am God's creation, and I'm supposed to be here no matter how I got here. I'm supposed to be here. They may call you a mistake, but God has already called you purpose. Say it with me. I am beautiful, intelligent, tenacious, strong, loved, and worthy of living a life of joy and fulfillment. You see, we don't have to allow our history to cage us, but rather we can learn and grow from it. Reach back and remember the seed planters to draw strength from. And if you can't identify any, look deeper. They are there in the trenches, standing in the gaps. They are the bridge to your destiny. Find the one seed that you can hold on to that can propel your growth in some way until another seed gets planted. In fact, let this message be the tilling of your soil and the planting of your seed, and then go out and water it and watch God give you the increase. It's your time to shine because somebody else is waiting for you to go and to grow so that you can become a seed planter for them. It's your time to shine, ladies and gentlemen. As both the giver and the benefactor of seed.